Thank you. Hello, everyone. This is a psychologist. Thank you for Stop Playing Diversity Part 3. So we're going to get into a discussion. What is performative diversity or diversity gestures compared to true transformative diversity? So we're going to dive into the conversation with women who are out in the field doing DEI work in terms of what field. So we will talk a little bit about that in terms of, so you understand the difference and you understand what maybe needs to be the true work. So again, Dr. Kamani, licensed clinical psychologist, welcome to my channel, Lifting Us with Climb Consulting. If you have not already subscribed to my channel, please do so right now, okay? So I'm gonna have my panelists just brief and we're gonna go right into the conversation. So Yvonne, I'll start with you.
Great. Hello, everyone. So excited to be here and have this discussion with this bevy of melanated beauties around the Brady Bunch screen. For all of you listening online, my name is Yvonne Alston. I am the Chief Cultural Architect, CEO, and founder of Indelible Impressions. We are a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging firm based out of Connecticut.
Thank you, Yvonne. Marissa.
Hi, everyone. I am Marissa Price. I am a social worker formerly in the social impact finance field, and now launching my own virtual assistant business. And yeah, so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Kike.
Good evening, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. My name is Kike Ojo-Thompson. I use the pronouns she and her, and I'm the founder and CEO of KOJO Institute, and we are an equity firm. We're celebrating our 25 years, specializing in anti-racism, located in Toronto, Canada, actually. So hello. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kike. Heather.
Hi, everyone. Heather Browning, she, her pronouns. I'm an independent consultant and certified women's empowerment coach, working with DEI initiatives for 14 years in the higher education sector and now doing it on my own. But very excited to be here with all these amazing women this evening and getting into this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Monica Cox.
Hi, everyone. So I am Monica Cox. I am a professor by day, but I am, as one of my friends told me today, probably, I think she called it a short-termer. And so I have a business where I am kind of working on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've also done some career consultations, and I accidentally kind of came into this space, but I realized that after engaging with so many people, there was a need for the unique brand of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and just work that I've done. And so thank you so much for inviting me to the Stop Playing Diversity.
Absolutely.
Because that has a story to it too, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So Dr. Monica Cox is my Spelman sister, and she was the one who created Stop. I want to start with you. So if you could share a little bit about what does Stop Playing Diversity mean and what was the motivation?
Okay, so yes, so happy Founders Day, by the way. So today is Spelman's Founders Day. So hey, that's really
yes.
So yes,
but yes.
Stop Playing Diversity for me started with a story, and the story came with me going into my current organization and asking them if they played diversity, and they didn't know what I talked about. And I don't even know if I knew what I was asking that day, but they said, "Of course, we don't play diversity. Come on in." And I realized that once I got there, they didn't quite know what I was talking about. And when I pushed really hard to say, this is how we need to change this environment, this is the kind of leader I'm going to be, there was just a lot of shock that I expected for those efforts to be real. I was not a token. I was not going to just sit on the side and let everybody do what they wanted to do. Like, it required a lot of change in that position, and it caused a lot of drama, strife, and everything. And so I later coined the term because I said people need to stop playing diversity. And this is well before 2020, but now we see that a lot of places they were playing all those statements, all that stuff, all the efforts and money that never came into pockets. It was playing diversity. So it resonated, and I never did it to have like a publicity type stunt or anything. It was just a real experience in my life. And I see that it hasn't stopped for other people. So that's the story and the motivation.
Yes. Yes, thank you, thank you. And I think the murder of George Floyd were asked or tasked to do DEI work, and there were a lot of organizations, new understanding of racism and commitment to anti-racist, efforts and things like that. But, after devoting our time and our effort to this work, that a lot of times is very much performative. So that up is that I'm going to present a question to the panel, and whoever wants to answer it will just go from there. Okay. So answer, what have been some examples of performative diversity work that you have seen and have on Black women? And anyone who wants to respond first.
I would love to go, because that was the question that like excited me the most. So I think it's important to define a little bit like performative. And so, when we're talking about performative, what we're talking about is that desire to show support or solidarity with a group of people who are marginalized or discriminated against, but we have no real commitment to, those efforts and no real showing. So saying we have a commitment, but now, having, for example, no DEI executives at the table, right? Or no real accountability structures that will impact, systemic, the systems that are, operating, processes, procedures, whatnot. And so in, one specific role that I had where I was hired as the diversity person, walked in and had no budget, no designated budget, was the only exec, if you will, that didn't sit at the executive table when they were making decisions such as creating KPIs for the organization or making organizational goals. There was no integration. And so, I'm doing the work and I'm coming up, with initiatives, and they just kept getting turned down. It was like, no, not that, no, not that, no, not that. So finally, myself and my boss, at the time, in talking to the CEO, were like, what do you need? Because every time I presented something, it got shot down. Well, ultimately, what I was told after almost 4 months of trying to push things forward and getting nowhere, it was like, we just need to hire more folks of color. Like, that's what we're just trying to do. We're just trying to increase our numbers. So I had information from doing an organizational assessment, right? And those are the things that happen, right? That's like my example. But those are the types of things when it's like you have these very external optics of like, we're an organization that stands by it. We're trying to, do X, Y, and Z. And then it's like, okay, to do that, here are actual things we need to do, not just for the people coming in, but the people that are already here. The people that are here weren't elevating. Their career pathways did not look the same as white counterparts. And so it's like, okay, well, here are ways we can put in place for processes and procedures to elevate Black women, other folks of color. And it was like, oh, no, we don't want to do that. We actually just want to increase our percentages so we can share that out and show that we are for diversity.
And I would, if I might be able to just jump in on that, that is probably one of the larger frustrations with organizations doing that, right? Is making these statements and these commitments, at least verbally, and not following through with accountability measures, not following through with how to drive it and embed it throughout every level of their organization so that it lives in operations. It is part of strategic planning on an annualized basis. There are metrics that are provided. I think one of the reasons why for me and my team at Indelible, we like to use, as we talked about Dr. Kamani last night, data as a driver, data as a compass, getting those facts so that it becomes much more indisputable in terms of what's really going on in the organization, what needs to be worked on. And as we often know, the old adage of what gets measured matters, right? And so looking at that data and putting the organization to the test to support progress and transformation. And that's the numbers game that we want them to play, not the other numbers game of, I got 3 of this, I got 2 of that. Oh my goodness, do we have someone with disabilities? Oh, we got to get somebody with disabilities, all of that. But to be truly engaged in transforming the environment, and especially not for appearances, but because the employees that have already committed to your organization matter. They matter. They have inherent value as being human beings, and they attribute their intellectual property and capabilities on a consistency within your organization. So at a minimum, they do not deserve anybody playing diversity. They deserve the real.
And I thought it was interesting, Kamani, that you mentioned the impact on Black women. And I think, just to kind of follow up on Heather and Yvonne's points, is that, once George Floyd was murdered, thereafter, we saw such an incredible increase in Black women being hired, particularly to lead these processes that, as Heather and Yvonne have stated, were improperly set up. So what is it called? The glass cliff. It's the setup to fail piece. And, I'm really resonating with Yvonne's point that in the first place, we have to begin with what problem are we trying to solve? Because then there is no target for success. There's no direction. And then Black women can't win, which is already sort of a common experience, regardless of the sector. But you add this now and, all eyes on you, but you don't have proper anything, funding, et cetera. And, I think those of us that have, been the equity leader in an institution know this setup quite well, all too well. So it's of particular concern for Black women because so many of us were put in that position. Some before George Floyd know it well. And then we kind of saw George Floyd's murder and saw this explosion and thought, this is going to be interesting. But the processes inside of institutions had not changed. They are not beginning with the critical question, what problem are we trying to solve? Yeah.
And I want to add something about like the book club.
What problem we're trying to solve and last cliff, right? So, yes.
Sorry about the delay.
Yeah. Oh, not the book clubs. Yes, go.
Yeah. I was just saying that because I was thinking about just all the comments before and the performative aspect where people, I think, really, I guess I put it in air quotes, tried to make an effort. As I said, all the books, shout out to all the authors who got their royalties that year. But it was almost like having a weapon, but people were just savvy enough to have the vocabulary, but not really know what they were doing. So it was kind of like, oh, I'm not guilty. I'm not that person because I read a book. And I just kind of wanted to say that too. Like it also felt very performative, but very insulting, I think, as a Black woman to see how people didn't dig deeply. And I think the word I'd use is just shallow. I saw a lot of shallow conversations. So.
Yeah, what I would actually add to what Dr. Monica is saying. Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay. But what I would like to add on to what Dr. Monica was saying is So
Yeah.
and also tying with what Yvonne was saying, when we talk about the performativity versus transformative, like in my specific example, and from the assessment, I was like, we're showing a really low level of psychological safety within the organization. So let's address that, right? Like the folks of marginalized identities did not feel safe being able to speak to their white managers about what was really happening, but yet you want us to focus on retention number, or not even retention. You want us to focus on recruitment numbers. It's like what are we trying to do here? And so to what Dr. Monica is saying, it's like when you have folks within these roles,
Right.
all of us sitting here, right, within those roles, and we're really trying to do, like, this is what it means to do DEI work, like for real, and then you get stuck in the trap of like, oh no, that's not what we meant. What we actually meant was if you can just, right, and so that becomes very problematic.
Yeah. It's what I call DEI light. They were looking for DEI light. They didn't want the depth, right? So whether you use DEI light or shallow, right? It's really about skimming the surface.
Right.
It is definitely not about launching out into the deep, or even just stepping from shallow into deep to say that this is warranted, that we have data to support the work that needs to be done and very clearly articulated. And you have individuals like ourselves that are in these organizations saying, we have a roadmap. There's a path, right? But it's going to take commitment. It's going to take discomfort, and it's going to take the next level of intentionality to make it a reality. But you have to stay with it. You have to stay invested and committed to the process. But unfortunately, as we see, for as many amazing, talented Black individuals, brown individuals that were brought into organizations at the height of this, now you're seeing where so many are like, go. And much like it used to be back in the day with marketing was like the first thing that they cut, because they didn't understand that, hello, you probably need marketing because that's how you're going to get your customers and maintain your profitability and stay financially afloat. It is the exact same thing with DEI support within organizations. You can't offload a portion of your workforce, right? And have a reduction in force and think that the remainder of your organization is going to feel psychological safety, that they're going to feel safe in terms of their roles, that the levels of productivity and all of that are going to maintain. That's where individuals like ourselves within the organizations can actually buoy the organization. We can help to maintain the engagement. We can maintain the loyalty and the satisfaction, i.e. retention, and still open up opportunities for attracting top talent.
Yeah. So I see, we were talking in terms of the audience, in terms of shallow, right? So Alicia Renese talked about the shallowness that we're just talking about. And when we think about, right? So the awareness is one thing, but where's the action? So a lot of times they stay at the very performative awareness part, but we have to look at the action as well, right? And when you all guys talked about the discomfort. So can you guys speak to that? The questions that I said we were going to talk about, but can we talk a little bit about the discomfort? I hear a lot about that in terms of the pushback, DEI work, people saying, well, we can't make people uncomfortable and we want to change hearts and minds. We have to have baby steps and all these different things. Can you please share what is the harm in those type of organizations?
Well, I think the harm is that the people that are experiencing harm and targeting remain targets. My friend and colleague down in, I think he's in Louisville, Kentucky now, he was in South Carolina, would call it pacing for privilege, that we're pacing the work for the privileged and their comfort. And that really makes actually no sense at all. But it goes back to that original point, which is, what problem are we trying to solve? And it sounds like a hyper simple question, right? It sounds almost primary, but at KOJO Institute, we intentionally use that kind of very plain, very sort of primary language to say, you've called us, what did you call us for? And so many will say, well, we're calling because George Floyd was murdered. Well, you know, so that, I mean, I think people think that that sounds, you know, sort of, what's the word, righteous even, but it also screams disconnect from what's going on in your own organization. So what does your organization's situation call you to be doing and ask you to be focusing on? You know, so that's just, you know, that's sort of what that makes me think about, you know, and it's all a circle, and it all starts with that lack of clarity, which is born out of a presumption that our systems are neutral, that our organizations are operating neutrally, and that groups that are having problematic experiences and outcomes are having those problematic experiences and outcomes because of their own inherent capacity or lack of capacity, right? So Black people are having poor outcomes in whatever indicators because Black people are inherently XYZ, for example. And if you think about that as a starting point narrative that we rarely think to disrupt, right? You know, we need to disrupt those narratives because they inform the degree to which we disrupt. They inform the degree to which we enact policy, system change, accountabilities, etc. All of these things are contingent upon, you know, what we believe in the first place about, you know, the space. Is the space racist? Is it white supremacist, or isn't it? You know, are these people having inherent outcomes, or is this something we're doing systemic, right? So those are the questions.
Yeah. And, you know, you too, in terms of when we think about DEI and what's happening, we think about true transformative diversity. It looks at the policies, the levels of accountability, and a lot of times the performative work does not even near touch any of that. So I'm wondering, in terms of when we think about DEI, Yvonne, you talked about this too, that you know, a lot, and I think Kike were brought into the DEI world, right? So when I was on LinkedIn and I was just inviting people based upon like there were so many Black women. It was like the vast majority of the people were Black women, right? So we're brought in to do very challenging in terms of come fix this problem we have. And so we come in and fix the problem, and we watch adversity, right? So when we think about DEI, and we think about the messages guys are told as out there in the field, right? So you're told in terms of we want that, but that's for you could do this, but not that, right? So within that DEI world, is there also an element of anti-blackness within that DEI world, and how is that addressed? And I want to also acknowledge our guest, Sonia Williams-Lewis, my other Spelman sister and classmate. So thank you for joining today. So in terms of issues about anti-Black and DEI, can you talk a little bit about that?
Were you directing that towards me?
Anyone?
Oh, okay. I'm going to give space for
anyone who wants
to join the conversation and lend her voice and expertise to it.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, Dr. Kamani, I kind of missed the question. You're cutting out just a little bit. So could you please repeat that?
Repeat it?
Yes.
Yes. And I'm so sorry about the internet. I don't know what is happening here, but it's a little lag, okay? So talking about anti-Blackness that we see in a lot of organizations. And so when we think about DEI, sometimes the Blackness gets lost, right? Sometimes we're told, oh, well, we're talking about all people, but anti-Blackness is very apparent in many organizations, but organizations don't want to specifically call out. So just wondering, in the organizations that you've worked in what ways have you seen anti-Blackness in the DEI space or not?
I can speak for my experience. So having been in the banking field for all of my career at this point, I've been in a lot of DEI internships that were created to bring in more employees of color to these really white corporate spaces, and not given the proper support resources once I got there, kind of cornered, abused by management and stuff like that. So not addressing that really crucial piece of anti-blackness and what does that mean for me to be, a Black student, a Black intern in this role, is huge. It's like, you have to address that in order for Black interns to be safe and supported in these environments where we haven't been in traditionally.
And I would take that a step further. I love the
absolutely,
question
absolutely.
with regards to anti-blackness in this space. It is something that I think that unintentionally, folks who lack a little bit of melanin in their skin, oftentimes don't see how that plays out in the workplace. And I'll give an example. One of my favorite training partners is fairer skinned than I, right? And so we go into larger organizations, school districts, entire school districts, and you have 300-400 folks that we're training at a time. And oftentimes the questions are addressed to her rather than to myself. And it got so bad to a point where she had to call it out. She felt that it was her duty and responsibility as a fair-skinned, more privileged Black woman to say, hold up, my training partner is just as qualified and has been doing this work longer than I. And every time we get a question, it's, Dr. Such and Such, can you answer this question? Yeah, this is your expert in the field, right? And so while I appreciate those efforts, it's a matter of getting folks comfortable with, one, the language and recognizing that a thing is a thing. Because as we all have said, that the data doesn't lie, these things happening to us aren't lies either. And it's so easy to digress to the microaggressions of making us feel as though we're crazy and to get over it in order for someone else's comfort to stay intact.
I think.
Yes. Sonia.
Sorry.
Yeah. Let's go on, Kike. Go on.
I was just going to say that I think what's so interesting is that, anti-blackness is literally the anchoring, is the anchor of racism, so the fact that race is a social construct, that, that it is a hierarchy of shade and phenotype, that African descent people were placed on the bottom of that hierarchy. So every time you talk about race and racism, anti-blackness is sort of inherently involved. And I think, that we participate in the language we use, the learned behavior, the learned reaction to sort of water down what's really happening, with various terms, for example, like, when we lump all people of color together, for example. So, for example, at my firm, at KOJO Institute, we do not use BIPOC as a term. We do not, because it suggests that the BIPOC population is having a similar experience. But the data is clear, as my sisters have said. Like, the data is painfully clear that the most extreme outcomes in every indicator is defined by, and I'm not talking about Indigenous people, or what y'all might call Native Americans, we call Indigenous people up here. Like, I'm not talking about them because, for one, they don't consider themselves racialized in the first place. So that's a whole other discussion. But in relation to people who are racialized, that Black people's outcomes are so problematically, out of the park, that the anti-Blackness is just a truth and a reality. It's interesting, the resistance reaction, but it's just further anti-Blackness, right? Because the narrative is that the experiences that we're having are due to our inherent, makeup capacity, etc. And that is anti-Blackness, right? Because it just doesn't stand in the historical truth. It's a sheer lie.
Yes.
Right. So, yeah.
Yeah. But we think about the social hierarchy in society. It's often in our organizations too, even though it's unspoken. We say BIPOC, or we say people of color, the experiences of Black people are often lost, right? And it's like, oh, we're all in, but not recognizing even within that BIPOC group, there's anti-Blackness. And so we are often and then told that we, well, we're all together, or it's not just about Black people, but our experiences are like. So in terms of calling that out, now I'm just curious, as we think about calling out anti-Blackness in your organization, what has been the impact when you have called it out? So if you've called out performative diversity, if you've called out anti-Black, what was the response by your organization to that?
Kamani, I was just going to say, Kamani, it might be helpful if you direct the questions at people, because I know I'm hesitating on purpose to, as Yvonne would say, like make room for the other sisters. So maybe if you could even if you just started by directing the question at somebody, so that I just know I'm feeling a sense of hesitation. Not that I don't have lots to say. So I just wanted to put that out there. But sorry, Dr. Monica, go ahead.
Okay.
No, that's cool.
Okay. Well, I think it also Black women, how we're very respectful of one another, right? And so many times our voices are not heard or disrespected. This is an example of when we try to make space for each other, right? And so we're all trying to make space for one another. And so I'll direct it to people. So Dr. Monica,
Yeah.
for your experience, when you've called out profanity and or anti-Blackness, what does that look like in your organization? What has been the impact on you?
You're fine. No, what I wanted to say is I think that you have to, first of all, not be afraid to say the word Black. And that seems like it's supposed to be understood, but I have worked in spaces where people can't even say the word. So to even talk about anti-Black, can we at least say Black and not think that it's a cuss word? Because that's something that I've said out loud too. And I've seen where people often acknowledge women, and I say this a lot, like there are different, like an organization, some places do the diversity work, but the diversity work they do is sometimes at their level of comfort. So in the space where I was in, people said diversity, 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 and we're going to share the percentage of women who are in leadership. But when you looked at Black women, it was like, oh no, like women, but there was a race component, a racial hesitancy, and I feel that also really led into the racism that was there. And so I just want to even unpack that at some point, where it's like an organization can say diversity and get by with it, but it's the Black part that shows their true colors.
Yeah, I'll jump in. And the reason that I hesitated with the question, not hesitated, but I was kind of like smirking to myself. I was like, I couldn't even say the word racism in the workspace. Like, because there was a specific, I honestly can't remember the incident, because this was when a lot of racialized incidents were happening in the US. It was at the beginning of 2021. So I honestly can't remember which one at the moment, sadly. But I remember I had to put out a communication statement based off of what was happening. And I created one in conjunction with someone, and was using very specific language. The murder of this person by police brutality, racism, and it got shut down. So if it can't even get to that, to acknowledge that, to make a statement that racism exists, I was like, anti-Black, like, and so it feels very silencing, because it's like that. I forget which question it was, but like, that piece around, I think Yvonne, you called it, was it like soft diversity? There was a phrase that you use.
DEI light.
Yes, DEI light.
Diversity light.
Yes, diversity light. And it's like, there was no way I could even get to that, because we couldn't even say racism, and so it makes it very hard to really elevate
That's ridiculous.
Yes, it is. But it's very hard to, elevate the like core issues such as anti-Blackness, and how that really is touches every single thing we can literally talk about under the DEI, equity, inclusion, belonging, like everything, right? But if we can't use the right language because we're trying to make people comfortable, it makes it very hard to address that.
Can I say something about language, Kamani? Yeah. Is that okay? Can I say something about language?
Yes. Go on.
Yeah. So I don't know
Yes,
if anybody's
absolutely.
noticed, but I don't even really use DEI or EDI. Because diversity and inclusion are frameworks, are framework options to get to equity. Like what we're trying to do is eliminate the disproportionalities and disparities that are experienced by whoever, everyone. In this case, we're here talking about Black women as Black women. And as we've identified, the data is very clear that we see some of the worst disproportionate and disparate outcomes for us. So for me, equity work is about eliminating that, and diversity and inclusion and all of those things, multiculturalism and cultural competence, all the way to what I call the antis, right? So anti-racism, anti-oppression, anti-Black racism, anti-colonialism, anti-racist feminism, the antis, they're all of our options to get to equity. And so when we study our data is clear. We need to be in the antis. Like diversity, having all the different colored Skittles, I call it, the candy in the room, is not going to save us from the kind of anti-Blackness and racism that we're seeing. Even inclusion. So inclusion says bring all of those diverse people to the decision-making table. But what inclusion doesn't secure is that the decision-making table will be critically unpacked. Like, what's the origins of this table? Who created this table? For what purpose? How does the table operate? It's not a neutral space, right? And then also unpacking the ideas that get attached to the bodies that we've invited. So we invite Black women, we invite Indigenous people, we invite people with disabilities, but to the Black women we've attached, you're loud, you're aggressive, you're scary, you're not smart, you're this, you're that. And so we show up invited to the inclusive table, having to bust through all that, wondering why we're not being heard, et cetera, experiencing all kind of trauma and bad behavior, that then there's no accountability system to correct, et cetera. We need to be talking about anti-racism. We need to be talking about anti-Black racism as a framework to attend to what we're experiencing, because those are the frameworks that actually attend to the socio-political, historical context of what we're experiencing. And so it's, it's time for us to not play diversity with them by sort of acquiescing into the language. And I get those of us that run businesses that we have to be recognizable to corporate America, et cetera. Like, hey, I do that thing that you want, that DEI, but I pray that when we get in there, we're correcting the score and we're setting them straight. Yeah.
I love that, Kike. Is it Kike or Kike?
I completely agree, right?
You say Sonia. You say Kike, Sonia.
Yeah.
Kike.
Thank you.
Kike.
Thanks.
I love that, because one of the things that just bugs me to no end is having to explain to organizations the failures of DEI, right? The ways in which it has fallen short for a multitude and at several layers within organizations, but specifically for Black women. And then on top of that, when you do have a qualified Black woman who is not afraid and unapologetic and very authentic in her voice and recognizing her agency and what it means to advocate on behalf of others as allies, it's the usury that takes place. It is I'm going to use you up to every drop that I can get, bleed you dry, and then throw you away. I am very intentional in introducing myself to on every discovery call that I am not your typical traditional transactional DEI firm. We are going to be very transformative. We are getting into mindset shifting. We are going to address belief and behavior. And I want to give one example of a school district I've been working with for the past 4 years. 77% or so of their student population is Black and brown. 92% of their teaching population is white. And of that 92%, 80% white women. And so the moment that January 6th happened, my partner and I we got into our training, just so happened on January 7th, the day after. And so we, as trainers, had a little powwow the day before and was like, we have to address this in this training. We have to push them to a place where they will feel comfortable making statements and not question why we made that statement, not question why we're talking about race. Because at the end of the day, when we don't, your global community around you sees what you're silent about. And I'm very intentional on reminding white folks that silence is violence. Silence can evoke change, but silence is violence at the end of the day. And every time you don't speak up on behalf of me and the little brown kids that look like me, us,
Yes.
you are allowing the violent trauma to continue to pack on our shoulders, and it's a heavy load to carry, generationally speaking.
All
Yes. It's
of
violence, right?
that.
And so when you're not allowed to say blackness, what does that mean? Yes. What were you going to say?
I just said all of that, right? Because these are the requisite conversations that need to
All
be
of that.
taking
Yes.
place, right? Like, we don't have time because people are dying, literally dying, because of this social construct that we call race,
Yes.
because of
Yes.
this racial caste system that we have in this country. And
Yep.
they are children, they are students at schools, they are aunties and mimas and big mamas, and the list goes on and on. They are people who look like us, our partners, our children, right? And so we don't have time to not have these critical conversations. Courageous, great. I'm talking critical, like a heart attack, because people's lives depend on it. Add to the fact that, as we talked about, Dr. Kamani, the impact to one's mental health, to one's physical health, to the cortisol surging through our bodies as we are dealing with the constant stress and emotional labor that is required of us on a daily basis, that is taking us out early, right? And so this is a state of just, sometimes I'm just going to be transparent here. Like, there are days where it just feels like a state of constant chaos, emotional chaos, violent chaos. You can't turn on the news without hearing about someone shooting up a school or someone going to a job, and, you know, or people coming out on social media and saying the most god awful things. I follow Ask Me Why, that's okay, but D.L. Hughley and the stuff that he posts about what people are saying and doing behind the scenes, and people in positions of power and authority in this country, and what they're saying and doing, is just, it's takes plotting and scheming to a whole nother level. And it is really about a genocide, essentially, of us, right? Physically, emotionally, psychologically. And we have to get to the point where we're talking about that, and we're talking about the impacts. That's the other data that we need to be talking about when we are in these spaces, is the impacts of the harm, the impacts of toxic work environments, and allowing toxic leaders to beget more toxic leaders, to beget more toxic leaders, so that the entire upper echelon of an organization, all the way through the middle to individual contributors, end up harmed, end up becoming generational toxic leaders, right? And so we have to be talking about this in the way that we are talking about it. Yes, with all the intellect. Yes, in plain language, but also with language that drives accountability as well as acknowledgement. I said recently to a client, I said, I don't know how to say this any other way, but I'm just kind of over the awareness play. Like, how much longer do we need to drive awareness if we are not driving action and accountability? Talk to me about the other A's, because the first A, been there, done that. We got the t-shirt, we got the matching hoodie. We're all good with that. I want to talk about the other A's that are actually going to change.
We got all the books.
When I think about what,
when
I think about what Yvonne is saying, and what, you know, other folks have said, I just think about the consistent pushback against that, right? Where it's like, yes, I agree with all of this. Actually, we've been clapping in our little, chat, and then I still think about when you're in some of those roles, right? Where you're in roles where you may not have the same agency, where you may not have, the ability to push in ways that you might be able to, let's say, as an independent consultant or as a, because I talked to those people. I was one of those folks, right? You talk to those folks and it's just burnout, because I'm not ever gonna like, I want to be careful when I say this, but I'm not going to fault somebody for needing to eat, so sometimes you got to pay your bills, right? I'm not talking about selling out. But sometimes you got to eat. So it's like, okay, right. Is this the hill I'm going to die on? Is this, even though I feel like I'm dying inside because this is going against everything about, and then of course those are times when you need to start leaving and dying. Yes, soul killing. Sometimes it's soul crushing, and until you may be able to get to the next thing, you're there and you're in it. So I want to acknowledge all of the knowledge that's talking about, the other A's and the let's call it out, be real, let's get past diversity, because I agree. And also I've been in the space where it was like, I don't know what to do, and that's a, kind of a different conversation in terms of plan and moving out, but that's very real as well, especially for Black women in these types of roles and these types of positions. So I just want to acknowledge some of that too. I'm not saying nobody wasn't, but I think it's important to also, it's like navigating through some of that can be very challenging depending on where you respectively sit in the organization, what kind of positional power you have. So in terms of, sorry, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I also think that you gotta,
if your work has on us, the toll that it has on us. Yes. What were you saying, Yvonne?
I was just going to say, as a consultant, somebody that's not necessarily part of an organization, but running my own and going into orgs, I think that, part of that is building rapport and trust, right? And being and understanding that when you broach the deeper topics, right? When you rip the Band-Aid off, so to speak, it is important. We can't deny that. And I think, Heather, that's a little bit of what you were getting to, right? Is that sometimes with some organizations, you can't come out hot. Some of them are just not going to be ready for that. And so I talk a lot about calibration and how important that is, knowing your audience. And once you build trust and relationship, not just rapport, but trust and relationship, it is, I find, at least my team finds, that it is much easier to go deeper once you've established that. But some of the things that we're even talking about here, I would love for that to be the entry point in the org and to be able to just flip all the cards over and say, okay, all mine are face up, you put all yours face up and let's get to work. But that's just not the way that it works. And I've seen that across the spectrum of clients, whether that's for-profit, nonprofits, paramilitary and safety organizations, even school systems, right? I'm working with school systems, and I will never forget that one of them was saying, do we have to use the word equity? Because people get really nervous about that term. They get really worked up about it, and they automatically assume that we're talking about diversity versus equity, and then they get it mixed up with equality. And I said, well, my role is to make sure that is abundantly clear as to what those things are. And equity is foundational. It is a fundamental requisite of the work. So, but again, I think how you develop the relationship with your client is very telling. And if you're reading the room, as you're reading the experiences as that develops, you're able to go that much deeper as time goes on, to the point where the trust is there that you can say the things that need to be said when they need to be said, and people are ready for it, right? Kamani, you know I'm a woman of faith, and I am 100% unapologetically authentic about that, right? So I think about the milk versus the meat. Sometimes you got to serve up the milk because baby's not ready for the meat yet, right? You got to help them get there. Sometimes you got to chew it a little bit for them, right? And so you have to be able to know that. And that's part of the calibration and the impact. I see you, Nina. The room is very tight.
Yeah.
I was just, go ahead.
So I want to say, just to start winding down, I just want to say a few things, and then I think Marissa, you came off mute. So just in terms of anti-blackness, right? Anti-racism, and the pushback a lot of times that we get about saying these words, the message is that our realities are not as important, right? Or our reality, like we're invisible, and that when we experience harm within the workplace, even by those who are BIPOC, so by other, right? So I have a whole thing on all skin folk and kinfolk, or by other people who may say, well, I'm of a group, so I can't be racist, and that is not true, right? Some of the worst racism I've experienced in terms of anti-blackness was not by white people, right? So when we think about this work, anti-blackness, anti-racism, that we're not talking just about white people, we're talking about white supremacist behaviors, okay? So we're talking about the gamut. Marissa, I think you came off of mute.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to give you a chance to talk.
Yeah, I was just going to add that when I called out anti-racism or racist behavior at my organization, there was pushback, ridicule, devaluing of what I said, but then they went and copied my ideas and used it for promotional. I feel like that's also, especially for Black women that I've seen. So I wanted to add that.
Dr. Kamani, just to kind of piggyback on Marissa's
point. That work, right? So something.
So
yeah,
is that okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
I was just going to say to piggyback on Marissa's point, the insidiousness of hiring Black women to do so-called DEI work, equity, what I would call equity work, and then not being okay with them naming racism. That's I think, a particular level of irony and insidiousness. And, I think that resistance is a normal part of this work. And we don't talk about that enough. So when we're setting up organizations and systems who say they want to get on the path, resistance has to be a massive part about what we teach about. We have to be talking about the resistance. We have to normalize it. We have to gird them up and build their muscles to respond to resistance, or else really, what are we doing? And lastly, the point about non-white people really terrorizing Black people and Black women in particular, we need to name that. And we need to be talking about that, again, the historical context where colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade is the reason that is happening, right? So the colonial project ensured that everybody on the planet also understood that the African was the worst, the least human, and the bottom of the hierarchy. So that's global information. That has nothing to do with being a white person per se. And so the performance of whiteness, the performance of white supremacy is still a tangible, you get tangible benefits from being able to do that. And as long as that is real, then that's going to be replicated. And so one of our major projects as equity practitioners is to disrupt that culture in institutions, right? Is to disrupt the culture that rewards white supremacist behavior, make them see it first, because most are unaware, they're aware and unaware at the same time. So make it plain, this is white supremacist culture that you're engaged in and reproducing and rewarding. So once that alertness happens, now you can shift the thing and say, well, who do you want to be? I'm going to help you incentivize that, reward that, and consequence the opposite. So that's the tactical sort of undoing that we need to be involved in.
And I think,
yes. Well, I just wanted to acknowledge Yvonne, sign off. And I wanted to, hold on one second, Sonia. So Yvonne, if you can just, and I'm going to circle, but Yvonne, I was going to ask each of us to share examples of true transformative diversity work and the toll that this type of anti-racist work can have, what advice would you give to Black women in this field, but about your business and how people can contact you? That's a lot.
And you were kind of breaking in and out a little bit intermittently, so I'm sorry I caught bits and pieces of that. You were asking me for examples of true transformative diversity work, if I'm correct. So I will say that prime example
Yes.
today,
Yes.
I was working with a client, and there is one woman who is Muslim and she wears hijab, and we had a one-on-one conversation, and it turns out that she does not have a designated place for prayers, and also not designated times. And so Eid is also coming up, and she was not going to have that time off. And I asked her if she felt comfortable about me working with leadership to make that possible. She's been with the organization for 2 years and has never felt psychological safety in which she could self-advocate for those things. And so I went to leadership and I asked, and I said that this is not an option from my viewpoint. This is not an option because this is a member of your team. This is part of her intersecting identity. This is critical for her and her faith system. And if we are truly moving towards being a more equitable and inclusive organization, that this would be a fundamental requisite. And I got commitments to that once they understood the magnitude of it, and also understanding the fact that they had created an environment in which this individual did not feel like she could come forward and advocate for this on her own. So I made it very plain that this was one example of the continued work that would need to be done within the organization, but that my goal was to advance equity and inclusion. And this is just one step. So I'm putting head to pillow tonight, knowing that this young woman, this Muslim woman, will now have 2 designated spaces in which to alternate to make sure that one is always available. She will no longer have only 5 minutes for prayer, but 15 within a 4-hour shift, and that she will have Eid off, right? And so this is what we are championing for. This is what we are fighting for. I think your last question was around what advice do I have for women who are doing this work? Do this, right? Come together, develop community.
And the psychological toll.
Yeah,
how
about
hard
the
it
toll
is.
that it takes on you. Get in groups where you get the requisite supports, and do not forget about self-care. I am what most people would call an ambivert, right? So I'm not fully an introvert, I'm not fully an extrovert, and I do get burned out from over engagement, and I need to step away. I know where my places and spaces are in which to refill my cup. This is emotionally laborious work. This is physically exhausting as well. We must tend to ourselves, our physical and mental health, and I commit to doing that. So find out what it is that allows you to detach, step away, and refill what you've depleted. And then as a last ask, I think you had in terms of how to get in touch, I am on LinkedIn. I put content out
About
there.
your business.
Yes. So you can find me on LinkedIn. And my website is indelible-consulting.com. If you want to get in touch with me and my team and learn how we can best support you, we are available. We are bi-coastal organization working from the carpet to the concrete and wherever we're called. So thank you all, ladies. This was a joy. I appreciate, and I've learned from all of you this evening. Thank you for your gifts.
Appreciate you. Take care. Okay, Sonia, you were up next.
Well, I'll go to that question because I think that it will, it ties in very well in that that thing that I think we're responsible for as facilitators, as stewards of this work, is to direct the choir. Like, there are people in every space that we go into and they get it. and you can see them coming and going. They're going to ask all the questions. They are going to be the ones that have read the book and the materials, and look, they've gone through your resource list, right? I identify my choir members and I put them to work. You are more than an ally. You are now the talking head of your organization. So when, you know, and for me, it's always a white male who causes disruption within a facilitation. When that person speaks up or is resistant, it is your job, not mine. I also make sure that they understand that I'm a passerby. So I'm here to help you see where and expose the gaps. It's your job to close the gaps, right? And so because it is, if I, every time I were in a facilitation with a different client, stopped what I was doing to coddle that individual who is disrupting, the burnout would be even so more real, right? As Yvonne was just saying. And so for those who are doing this work, I would just say, pick your battles, because you're going to see that same mask in every organization you go to. And it's not always a white male, right? Sometimes it's us who have gotten to a point of privilege who are like, I really don't want it to change, but this looks good on our, you know, website. And so the last thing that I would say is challenging organizations to undergird their global footprint, because they're more than just their customers, right? They're more than just their employees. They are the community that they exist in. And so if you can't tie social justice to that community, to what you're doing and why you're there, I think that you're siphoning off of it, and you're just you're killing a community off by stealing its resources. So that's what I would share. We have to be the choir director, and they have to be the leaders of the work.
I like that. I like that. And Sonia, if you could briefly share with the audience as we're winding down and how people can contact you.
Go to my website, which is Ascribe, ASCRIBE, success.com. We do this free discovery calls where we like help just like what's the basics that you think. And I love that question. What do you want to be? Like at the end of the day, what is the end goal? Because I so hate having that discovery call and it's like, oh, you too radical for me. Okay, well, you need to identify what you want to be at the end of the day, because that's where the work gets done.
Yes, yes. Thank you. So what about for you?
I'll go ahead and jump in because I do have to jump off in about 5 minutes. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So in answering the actual, the question that you put out and examples of transformative work, I think about one of my last like full-time roles, like doing this like within like a organizational environment outside of like a consultant capacity. And I just see I've seen so often, and still see it as a consultant, but see so often how employee resource groups, ERGs, are often taxed with like diversity efforts, like what y'all doing for Cultural Heritage Month, what y'all doing for, and these aren't their full-time jobs. These are volunteers, and oftentimes they're volunteering because they don't see anybody else doing it in leadership, but they also don't have the positional power to really push anything. But I bring it up because I pushed against that. I was like, it is not their responsibility to, to integrate DEI throughout the entire organization. And so when executive leadership at that time started asking questions around like, oh, Latinx Heritage Month is coming up, what are they doing? I was like, they're not doing anything. like that. You all really, first of all, we got to get past the Heritage Month. That's a whole other conversation. But, it's like, I started asking the questions of like, where is the responsibility with C-suite leadership? Like, how are you all taking on something within this puzzle that we've started sparsing out with using the information from this organizational assessment? How are you, from your role, integrating, what does it look like to create a KPI for the upcoming quarter? What does it look like, and create metrics for that, and hold your team responsible, for that. Because when I think of transformative, I really think of, we have to get to the core, and we have to shift the system that is operating. And that is that's a challenge, right? And, all the fluffy stuff does not change, some of those systemic, things. But the ERGs, I was like, we're not doing this anymore. like I'm not, yeah, that was really frustrating. But, in terms of
pushing back on that to be accountable.
Yeah. And I provided examples. Deloitte had done a great report. I want to say it was 2021, 2020, did a great report, and had some very key, I don't want to use tactics. It was like, if you are CMO, this is what you can do. If you're CDO, this is what you can do. And bringing forth to be like, this is what it looks like. But I still got pushed back against that, but that's a whole nother. But yes, so, yeah.
Of course.
And then,
of course. So Heather, just briefly, in terms of the psychological toll, like what women doing this work?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah. So in terms of, so you talked about the pushback and the hard work this is, right? So what advice would you give to a Black woman anti-racist work, or the confronting anti-Blackness within her organization? What words of wisdom can you offer her?
Yeah. So, I think Yvonne said it before, she left, but the support system is so vital. It really is, because I had folks on speed dial, crying my eyes out, and in the moment, I just got out of this gross meeting. They were literally attacking me in this meeting. I don't know what to do, and I had women across the country that were trying to help me with tactics, trying to, hey, try this. Hey, write an email like this. Hey, and so it was both the emotional support piece, but it was also getting help around strategy. I was like, well, this isn't working. What are you all doing over there? This isn't working. So having that community to tap into instantly was vital, both for my, emotional piece, but also to try to do the work the best that I could, and getting that, moving forward. But I think I just think Black women support Black women differently, and then and having Black women, in support is just so key. And not just in DEI work either, life be lifing. That is my constant saying, life be lifing. And so, if you're really struggling, that's key. I had, even during that time, LinkedIn, I would just I would see DEI in someone's heading, and just message them and be like, I'm struggling. I didn't even have to explain myself. And they would take an hour out of their day to be like, let's set up tomorrow, talk to them, transparently crying, help. But it's very real, and so reaching out, if you don't have it, being able to be vulnerable enough to reach out, because I can guarantee it's that you're going to find it in some capacity.
Yes, community. So Heather, just briefly, what services do you contact you?
Yeah, so again, I am a certified women's empowerment coach and a DEI consultant. I work largely with the higher education sector because that's my background. And I'm the founder of Heather B Coaching and Consulting. And you can find my website, heatherbcoaching.com. And you can find all of my information about what I do and my background. And I'm also very active on LinkedIn as well. So you can also find me on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Heather. I know you need to sign off. So I actually met Heather and Kike, a lot of you guys on LinkedIn, right? In terms of community, right? So important to build your community and get support and all those different things. So thank you so much, Heather. What about you, Kike?
Oh, thank you, Kamani. So just again, it's been a real pleasure. I'm Kike Ojo-Thompson. I use the pronouns she and her. I'm the founder and CEO of KOJO Institute. We are a full service equity consulting firm We spend most of our time on racism and utilizing the anti-racism and anti-Black racism frameworks to do our work in the public and private sector. Globally. And so I guess what I will, and so how you find us is kojoinstitute.com. So Kojo with a K, Kojo Institute, one word.com, or Kojo Institute on all major handles, or by my name on LinkedIn as well. People have said a lot, so I'm not going to sort of repeat too much. But on this matter of support, what I would say is for those of you that are here that are equity leads in your organization, institution, really think about whether your context could withstand having a community advisory table for the work. Because the community advisory has on many occasions saved me when I was leading equity work inside of institutions. So having those showdowns with people when I needed to articulate anti-Blackness or white supremacy in a document, or hold a system, like I worked in child welfare for almost 14 years in senior leadership and needed to hold them accountable to white supremacy and about their anti-Blackness in terms of outcomes for children and youth and Black families. Having to have that scrappy fight, I'm talking about raised voices, tears, in the CEO's office. And being able to say, all right, you don't think we can put white supremacy in the document? You tell the community advisory. We have a meeting next week. I'll set it up. And you come in and you tell them that we're not going to put those truths. So I'm just playing out that example for folks to just talk about what we, when we, some other ways to think about support and setting up systems of support and it's bearing witness, right? It's the setting up your witnesses in advance. So that when the foolishness begins, you've got your back, as we would say in the Caribbean, you've got your backative ready for you to support you. So that was a shout out to the Caribbean people here tonight. So yes. So yeah, I'll offer that.
Awesome. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kike. Okay, thank you so much. Marissa, what about for you?
Yeah, I would just say that starting internally is so important. I think for organizations, there's often an external focus. So like the grants you're making, the investments you're making when it comes to me in the social impact finance field. But starting internally and making sure your Black employees, Brown employees are supported, they're paid equitably, I think is so important before you even take on these initiatives. And just some advice I would give is you don't have to solve problems you didn't create. So don't feel like you have to take on that work. You can rest. It's okay. Please rest. And you can reach me at mpricemsw.com is my website.
Yes.
And I'm on LinkedIn under my name, and then Instagram as well, mpricemsw.
Awesome. And I just want to say, Marissa started a YouTube channel and she did video. I'm going to put that in the description section. And when I saw your video, I was like, I got to reach out to you. You got to be on this panel. I want to encourage the viewers to please watch her video and subscribe to her channel as well. So Dr. Monica Cox.
Hi, everybody. So, you know what? I'm going to wrap this up. And Kamani knows I am not the night person. I am hanging, girl, but it's late where I am, and I love you. And that's why I'm doing this. Because yeah. But anyway, let me get back to business. The question.
I appreciate you. Okay.
I'll make it quick. So in terms of what I think can be done, I talk about the term accomplice, and I know we've heard this before, like variations of this, but I just cut to the chase. My thing is, when I'm in the room, don't be the one who lets me take the bullet. And I think it's just, please, can somebody get some courage? That's my thing. I just need people in 2023 to get some courage, because it's very rough out here. And that's it. When you
get some,
like I saw some of the comments, when you see the silliness in Florida,
yes.
when you see the silliness in Texas, stop saying that mess is cute and just be like, no, that's unacceptable and off. And nobody can tell us that we can't read a book. Like the end. Like why are we arguing about stuff like that? So I just need people to use common sense, speak up, do better, And I don't know, just that's the whole premise of Stop Playing Diversity. So you can reach me on all social media platforms at Dr. Monica Cox. I talk a lot.
Stand up for what's.
What else you need? What else you need me to say, Kamani? What you need?
But to also stand up for what's right, right? So I have a pen on, you can say I can, I will. And so we think of, sometimes we sit back and like, oh, well, we're waiting for the organization, but it's for what each person can do, right? Each system and say this is wrong, right? So in terms of courage. Now, Monica,
Yes.
what were you saying? What is courage? What does it say? It says courage?
You said I can and I will was your pen.
Yes.
And my
so,
little pencil case is I can and I will. My little pencil. I still have
oh, you have it?
Yes, I do.
Yes, man, and we will absolutely do it. So, Monica, what about the toll that this work has on wisdom would you give to Black women watching this right now and they're just beat down
Okay, I'm gonna say this real quick
by
too.
being in the trenches and doing?
Absolutely. I talk about being transactional. That's my kick right now. So often, I mean, I think I said this before in another session, but we want to be like the nurturers and let's just take all the burdens on. Stop that mess. Like we were not meant to carry all that. We are not the pack mules of the world. And we just have to be the ones to say, not today. I'm not here to do that. That's outside my job. I say that too. I have like a mug, a product where I say, it's not in my job description to uphold the patriarchy. And I think so often people are out there just doing this. And it's like, we have to do this because this is the system. If the system doesn't make sense, stop trying to oppress other people with it. And I know that sounds so easy, but go back to common sense. Like I keep going to this issue of common sense. If you're oppressing your sister, if you're oppressing yourself, would you allow somebody to come and beat you in the head? So why are you allowing your boss to beat you in the head at work? And it's just really common. Like we have all these standards. You're going to make me go off. I don't know why I'm getting my second win right now, but you know what? We got second win. I mean, we have, standards when it comes to how we want a man to treat us. Can you act like that person at your job is your man and not let him disrespect you? Have that same regard for your boss that you have for that man that you're trying to date. That's all I got to say to my sisters. Have some standards. And anyway, let me go on. Let me stop. Y'all get me messed up. I'm done. Let me be professional again. Thank you so much for having me.
So Monica, how can people get in contact with you again? And what services do you offer? How can people contact?
Truth telling is what I do.
You.
At Dr. Monica Cox.
Yes, it is.
And yes, this is how it was birthed. So you know what? I'm trying to lead the revolution. So just contact me if y'all need somebody, right there.
Yes, you are.
Thank you.
You are. And my sister speaks truth to power. Follow her on Twitter and Instagram. She is hilarious. But she called. So I just want to say to everyone, I so appreciate you guys for tuning in today. I'm so sorry about the technical glitch. I do want to be mindful of the community. So I do want to briefly read through the comments. Panelists, if you need to, I know we've gone over time, and I greatly appreciate each of you for coming on and talking about this. Hurtful, or I'm not sure. It depends on what the viewers say. So just very briefly, I just want to go over the comment. Thank you, DEI Theater, lots of acting and very little action. Let's see, it's with us in mind. It sounds good, but show the work. Let's see, shallow, equal opportunity in DEI, but all the recommended topics were strikes. Like, so how could we no money in the budget? They wanted to work the overworking and undersupporting and funding. What's that? It says, I actually don't care about the true. DEI is the only function I know where people want to take it slow to get immediate results. I can imagine how much work was a part of you. I dreaded the meetings that I served on as a DEI advisor. Questions were ever taken up. I minded my business. Talk to me when y'all ready. You really, there's a kid's book, Car Race, that describes equity. That was too much. Oh my G, on down the drain. That's definitely disrespect of your time and energy. Happy Founders Day, Spelman sisters. Yes, happy Founders Day. Elementary kids can get the book that was mentioned. It's the room adults can, but the reality was that they aren't ready. Come to me when you're a real change. Okay. Let's see. A lot of thank yous in the forest, so you can't trust y'all at home. How am I going to trust you on the battlefield? I'm good. That is solidarity, but done in the first place, awful. There's a training we are required to do on insider threats, and they, okay, I always thought the term BIPOC was a lazy catch-all, and I refer to the James Baldwin in America as to be a state of constant rage. They aren't all bad, but there are bad in other sector. The difference, though, is those people who have biases and authority to impose policy. So the James Baldwin quote is real. Everywhere you turn, I got to remind myself to disengage women, but not you, Black women. Like it's taboo to acknowledge that Black experience is different. We should make alerts that we are not told to say. They are not ready. If you can't say it, we can't solve it. Replaced by unconscious bias. That's my mantra. Art, music, healing, culture is a band where I work. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. This is a great conversation to people and to group all of us. It's lazy, it's disrespectful of our differences. It's like telling us we don't know your specific needs and meet them. Anti-Black racism, yes. It snaps. But look at the Texas. Most of the discipline is directed towards Black students. Bet even Tennessee, crickets, silent staff is definitely talking about race and racism, whether you are or not. U.S. history, we don't have time. You're not gonna give me heart disease. From dealing with, yes, Black with a capital B seems to be a forbidden word. No, ma'am. Toxic leaders beget it. It's a real problem. Soul crushing, soul killing. I found that the toxicity in a leader is equal. Yes, low self-esteem breeds toxicity. Absolutely. Speaking facts. At this, GPT can write an excellent multi-point DEI plan. These orgs don't want to implement, measure, change they say they want. There are many people in leadership roles who frankly shouldn't be there. That is so true. Yes, so true. Soul dreams, soul crushing. At this point, it's a lot of plethora of DE policies, programs, and our procedures. However, companies and organizations rarely adjust or modify to align with them. And 2 words, we're tired. Yes, we are. Okay. They get nervous because they want to protect their jobs. In their heads, they're replaced by a Black person to the fear. Some of these organizations have adult teeth and still trying to eat puree, able to open other perspectives to at least either consider a different point of view. Some people are just pointing, been there. Let's see, they don't listen. They don't want to listen, but simple benefit from their position. So much of what it is, First Amendment, as long as it's not different than ours, a lot of emotional labor. Dr. Kamani, this is a great space to refill our community. As a manager, I found that most of the DEI efforts focused on every marginalized communities, ex-Blacks. It is extremely disappointing. I relate to that on so many levels. I do too. The irony of all the gems you are dropping this evening. Keep fighting the good fight and pouring into others, doing and growing. It is so unimaginable to wrap their mind around. The goal is equity. Companies need to hire, promote, period. audit the salaries to make sure we are not being underpaid. These things aren't difficult. Lastly, to get at the bottom of why people are leaving. So true. All women panel, a different perspective. Let's see. Thank you for the great insights. Transactional, uphold the patriarchy. Oh, you mean with Black men as well as other bosses? Keep that energy. Let's see. Okay, we're about to wrap it. It's so many comments. Okay, you know that. So a lot. Okay, so the panelists, thank you for your insights. Kike, I really appreciated what you said and for asking the client, what is it that they want, what outcomes, what changes, okay? So out of time, but as you can see, this is a very popular topic. I think we may have a part 4. People are in this field and they're being harmed. They're being harmed, right? So we come in with that excitement, like, oh, we're gonna do it. And like Dr. Monica said, we get slaughtered, right? We get slaughtered in these streets. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that if you are out here doing this work, that you are building community, that you do what you can do. Do not coddle. Don't try to take care of other people. And don't let people try to exploit your labor, okay? And when it's time to go, you recognize those physical, mental symptoms, it's time to go, pivot and go. But on my channel, I talk a lot about that. If you want more information about how to leave a toxic job, please go to my YouTube channel, Bonus Services. And I want to say thank you to all of my panelists for staying long, audience for listening. So everyone, good night. Panelists, if you could just stay on for a brief moment. Okay, so